Look what wineries have done over the past 10, 15 years since they allowed wineries to sell direct. That industry has boomed. I mean, in Central Texas, there are wineries everywhere.
The wine business has grown tenfold. I think back in '03, maybe, it was $132 million business. And then in '09, it was a $1.3 billion business. That was following that change to allow wineries to retail from their place of production.
It doesn't have to be a big restaurant, but if people want to come up there and drink fresh beer and throw horseshoes or whatever it is out back, gosh, let them do that, because it gets this attachment to the brewery that's really critical, right? It's more than just drinking the beer. You want to know the place and the people and everything about it.
And so then at that point, the brewery is manufacturing, and then they're also retailing at their tap room. So I think the distributor is always concerned, I think, about the three-tier breaking down.
The Texas wholesalers are very concerned that any kind of change to the three-tiered system is going to weaken it and do away with it. But craft brewers are second only to them in desire to see the three-tiered system alive and well. Because without that, if there were tide houses, where would the craft brewers be?
Tide houses were companies like Budweiser had bars that were only Budweiser bars. You could only sell their beer there, and those breweries own the bar. That's what the three-tier system was one of the things that was designed to break up, so that breweries didn't have a monopoly in the market.
But all the other states in the union have a three-tiered system, and they have made allowances within the three-tiered system to promote these small businesses and to maintain all of the goals of our alcoholic beverage code, temperance, and an orderly market and collection of revenue and that thing, and that hasn't all fallen down.
We met these guys from Strange Brewing in Denver, Colorado, that were brewing on like a one and a half barrel system. But in Colorado, you can walk right in there, sit down at the bar in their tap room at their brewery and buy a retail pint of beer. Within a year, they were up to a 10-barrel system and they were starting to distribute, but they were allowed to grow by selling right out of their brewery at retail prices and not having to deal with all the distribution of it. If we're allowed to build our brand and grow our business and survive as a small business, we're going to get to the point where we can't do distribution. So we're trying to build our brand to force ourselves to have to go to them and go, please go deliver my beer and take a cut.
Once you get to a certain size, you got to go through a distributor because it only makes business sense. And so I think that the wholesalers are eventually, they're going to see that this makes good business sense for them, and they're going to want to participate in the business and work with us to shore up the laws to keep, to keep their position and our position safe.
I work with a large wholesaler, and they have been fantastic. They are huge believers, and in the old days, the big guys, they didn't believe. Craft beer hadn't proved itself. The numbers just weren't there yet. And we've kind of proven ourselves now. We're growing. And so they've all kind of come around now, like all the big guys have all come around. But unfortunately, their lobbyists have not quite gotten the memo. We got our bill through, it made it out of committee, it got on the calendars, it went to the floor, it was going to get an up or down vote. Somewhere between calendars and the floor, the distributors, lobbyists tacked on some extra verbiage that created a situation where the big guys would not have been able to do this same thing at the tours at their brewery. And it's basically creating a case of discrimination right off the bat. And we didn't write that in. We wrote the bill with Anheuser-Busch. We wrote the bill with Miller, who has a brewery in Fort Worth. We wrote the bill with all the big guys because this was all Texas brewers. We were all united behind this, and they were behind the bill. Well, of course, as soon as the wholesalers wrote that in, then they were all against it. And so it's like, and then it created, they also added a nice little caveat into it. And this was the best part, this was the poison pill, that if any part of the bill was found to be discriminatory or unconstitutional for any reason, then anything referenced in the bill became unconstitutional. And they had managed to reference the original stuff that made self-distribution possible for small brewers. And once we all saw that, which took about 5 minutes of looking at the bill and being like, well, fuck these guys, it was like, well, we got to kill it ourselves. So we killed our own bill ourselves. That was one bullet out of their gun, though. We're not going to be that stupid next time.
Here we are, 2 years after HB 660 and 602 were defeated. The past 2 years have been spent a lot just trying to identify what the opposition to us really wanted. And once that was identified, I think it was a lot easier to come to an agreement.
So there was this interim committee that was put together. There were discussions that were had between all interested parties, including the Craft Brewers Guild and including some of the distributors' lobbies.
For the first time ever, really, at the negotiation table at the legislature, the Guild and our representation had a seat at the table, so I think that was important. And kind of going hand in hand with that is the fact that I think the distributors recognize that craft beer isn't something that is just going to be a flash in the pan that's going to go away. That's something they can just kind of like stomp out, that it's here to stay and that the public wants it, and they therefore took the attitude, instead of maybe how can we defeat this or keep this tamped down, how can we, well, to put it bluntly, make money off of beer, because obviously that's their prime motivation.
One of the wholesale organizations, the Beer Alliance of Texas, worked with us to try to come up with solutions to some of the problems that we faced, and they were great partners in this interim committee to try to come up with agreeable legislation for the 2013 session. The other main wholesalers organization in Texas, the Wholesale Beer Distributors of Texas, opted not to participate in that interim discussion, but did get involved during the actual legislative session and brought their own bill to the table. What their bill did was make it illegal for brewers to sell the right to distribute their beer to their wholesalers, but to make it explicitly legal for wholesalers to sell those same rights to one another. In effect, what that means is that if you have a self-distributing brewery that had built up a lot of sales, they cannot be compensated for the existing sales. They just have to hand this existing business over to a wholesaler.
But then the distributor can turn right around and sell the rights for potentially millions of dollars to another distributor. So I think the phrase we used in our blog was legalized theft.
There are still a lot of things that you can get. You can get infrastructure. You can, it's a contract, so you can tie into the contract many value exchanges, just not cash.
In no way does this prohibit a distributor from helping you buy a new facility or a new tank or a new cold space or any of that stuff. It just says you cannot outright pay me for territorial rights.
The distributors had the power to really come in and say, okay, once we get past like this hurdle, once we have you complicit with 639, then we'll talk about other stuff. But if you're not even going to do that initial hurdle, then everything is dead.
There had to be a negotiation, otherwise that bill was going to move through whether we wanted it to or not. The best chance we had of our bills making it through was for all of them to become a package, because we were able to get the other side to agree basically to not oppose any of the other bills.
Everybody tries to get something new in every legislation session. When these bills in this last ledge were passed, they did do a lot of politicking and a lot of renegotiations, but I don't think anyone really felt like they were trying to sink anything. They tried to get a few things and they got them, and we tried to get a few things and we got them.
On the brewery side, the bills that were for microbreweries effectively reduced the amount of barrels that you could self-distribute per year from 75 down to 40,000, but in exchange is giving brewers the right to sell for on-premise consumption. So pints of beer in your tap room or on a tour, things like that.
We're able to sell our beer now instead of give it away for free. I mean, there are some breweries who just couldn't afford to give it away.
There is still an issue we feel is that production breweries still can't sell beer to go. So when people come out to our brewery, they can buy a glass, but if they wanted to buy a bottle or a six-pack of cans or a growler or something like that, they can't.
I can sell you a keg, but you have to consume the entire keg on premises. I can't sell you a growler. I can't sell you a bottle or a case. But that's for next ledge.
For brew pubs, one of the bills that were presented increased their annual production from 5,000 per location to 10,000. The second element of it was more referring to the distribution of beer for a brew pub, which is brand new.
Now brew pubs have the ability to send beer out for distribution. They can either sell directly to retail outlets, or they can go through a third-party distributor and send their beer out to retail outlets. The one caveat on the direct sales, though, is that brew pubs have to choose between distributing their beers directly to the trade and selling other people's beers on site. So a lot of brew pubs in Texas also sell other people's beers. They can't continue to do that and also self-distribute.
The brew pubs got the right to really act like a real brewery in the free world. I mean, and more specifically, they got the right to be able to sell beer beyond their own four corners of their brewery. We're small enough in terms of our annual production volume that we can change our license to a brew pub so that we can take full advantage of the ways in America that breweries typically can sell beer through a distributor, through self-distribution, on-site glass of beer, as well as bottles or growlers to go. Even if your goal is to be selling someday 50,000 barrels, still I think it makes sense to spend the first couple years as a brew pub because you can take advantage of beer-to-go sales. If you look at some of the major success stories in American craft beer, it's little pubs that started out on a 7-gallon system, not even a 7-barrel system, and then have grown into major craft breweries, regional craft breweries today. And that success story was illegal in Texas, and now it's not. So that's a huge thing that's, I think, really going to craft beer in Texas was already doing well. I think it's just going to take the lid off of things, and it's really going to explode now.